You always make things about you? My daughter smirked before her wedding, so I quietly made it about her and her $72,000 secret. You always make things about you, my daughter said, her tone flat, smirk cold. Don't try to ruin my wedding like you ruined my father's funeral. Her words froze me in place. The soft clink of champagne flutes grew distant. Somebody stifled a laugh. It was the rehearsal dinner at top a Manhattan rooftop. White linens, candlelight, 5-string quartet. The servers glided like dancers, each detail curated. Silk-tied eucalyptus, monogrammed menus. This was her performance, and I was a silent, outdated extra. My table sat near the kitchen doors, one chair, no centerpiece, my name card hidden beneath a napkin. Every other table buzzed with touch-ups, laughter, air kisses. Mine felt like an exile in glitter. No one spoke to me. Nobody asked how I felt. I had dressed in pale lavender, her favorite color on me, and applied lipstick. My hair curled. I looked elegant, she once said. Still, I might as well have worn a uniform saying ghost. Then she approached in that dress she probably inherited or rented from Vera Wang Fitting, whichever cost more than our first apartment's rent. She dropped a stack of paperwork onto the table. Just sign it, Mother. Don't start your drama. Not everything is about you. A woman behind her chuckled softly. Didn't know she was still around. She didn't correct it. She mirrored that smirk and waited. Tap, tap, tap of her manicured pen. I lifted the pen. My hand trembled. Or maybe the pen was heavier than I'd ever expect. I signed. One steady loop of ink. No questions, no hesitation. She took the papers and walked off. Shoulders high, no eye contact, no thanks, no acknowledgement that the woman who sold her wedding ring to raise her was now seated near mop buckets. I stared out at the glass skyline. Manhattan glistened. But that night it looked like a city built to forget the one who raised them. I remembered when she was 9 and broke her ankle on the monkey bars. She cried so loud that I carried her 2 blocks home. She whispered then, "Mom, when I get married, you'll sit next to me always." I wondered if she recalled. Dinner arrived. Everyone got steak or salmon. I had dry risotto and limp asparagus. No one asked if I had allergies or offered water. I watched her toast with the groom's mother who had a corsage. Seat at the head table. Mention in the toast. I was listed nowhere. A slideshow began. Engagement photos in Greece. Birthdays I paid for. Disneyland 2001. My face cropped out, standing behind the camera, holding snacks and anxious backpacks. I felt no tears left. She had become polished cruelty, rehearsed in mirrors, erased people with a flick of a wrist and a glossy smile. Still I stayed, not proud, not obligated, curious. To see how far the knife could sink with no blood drawn. A waiter spilled wine by our table, and surprised, told me, "I thought this section was for staff." I nodded. What else was there to say? She passed by again, glanced at me once. No guilt, no warmth, just calculation. She got what she needed. My signature, a silent account, a sidelined seat. But I had started watching. I had read every document. I'd taken copies. She thought I'd fade like a napkin in a breeze. Too old, too quiet, too grateful. But something shifted. Not rage, not revenge, a cold clarity humming with memory. She did not ruin her wedding, but she began ruining herself, and I was just beginning to watch. 6 months before the rehearsal dinner, my phone rang at 11:07 p.m. I remember the time because I was already in bed, half reading a book I had read twice before, just to feel something familiar. When I answered, all I heard at first was sniffling, then her voice, breathless, small. "Mom, he lost the job." They cut his department 2 months before the wedding. The venue is non-refundable. The deposits are locked in. And if this falls apart now, I'll look like a failure. Everyone will know. And I cannot lose this. I cannot lose him or you. She had never called me like that before. Not since high school. Not since the night she got caught drinking at a friend's house and called me from the backseat of a cop car, begging me not to tell her father. That same panic. That same desperation wrapped in performance. "I need your help, Mom," she said like it was an afterthought. And just like every other time before, I gave it. She used to say I was her entire world. Now I was just her backup plan. Silent, disposable, and only useful when someone else failed. That is not motherhood. That is being held hostage by the hope that one day she might remember. I had no savings to speak of, just a modest pension, some inheritance from my late sister, and 2 small accounts. One for medical expenses, one for emergencies. This felt like both. I went to the bank the next morning and withdrew $72,000. I remember the exact number because the teller looked at me like I had made a mistake. "Are you sure, ma'am?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "It's for my daughter's wedding." I sold the only valuable thing I had left, a gold wedding band from my husband, worn thin over 3 decades of dishwashing and diaper changing. I pawned it without blinking. Not because it meant nothing, but because it had already given me the most important thing it could, her. When I told her, she cried again. "You saved me," she said. "You always do." But then came the caveat. "There's just one thing," she added, hesitating. "We're branding the wedding a certain way, minimal, independent, a modern couple doing it all ourselves. You know how people talk. It would be cleaner if your name isn't on any of the official thank yous or anything." At first, I thought I'd misheard. "What do you mean cleaner?" she fumbled. "Not cleaner, just easier. It's for the aesthetic. Everyone's doing it now. It doesn't mean we don't appreciate you." She promised it would just be on paper, that I would still be included, still be part of everything, just behind the scenes. "You're the foundation," she said. "The roots, not the banner." I agreed because I believed that love meant compromise, that mothers were meant to be behind the curtain pulling strings with invisible hands. I told myself that being invisible was a sign of strength, but over the next few weeks, the cracks began to show. The first invoice arrived, 6 digits, for a historic venue with a rooftop garden and crystal chandeliers. Then came the designer fittings, Vera Wang flown in. A cake so elaborate it had to be refrigerated on site. A photographer who specialized in drone footage in vintage film, and a videography crew of 8 with drones and wireless mics. I asked once softly, "Is this still necessary with everything happening?" She smiled like I was a child asking why clouds float. "Don't worry, Mom. It's all handled. You're not the only one helping." But I was. I knew it. No one else had $72,000 on standby. No one else had co-signed anything. Then one day, an email arrived. I think it was a mistake. She had forwarded me something about catering, and at the bottom was a reply from the wedding planner. "Thanks again to the father's estate for the payment," it read. I stared at that sentence for a long time. The father's estate. My husband had been dead for 9 years. His estate had been closed, split, and spent. There was no father's estate, just me. Just what I had scraped together by pinching coupons and skipping medications. I started digging. I opened the wedding folder she left at my apartment during one of her visits. I looked through the contracts, the licenses, the payment forms, and I found it. The wedding license not yet signed. The catering agreement. My name on the billing section. The venue contract. Again, me. Address, email, signature. The IRS tax forms. The address listed was mine, but the name used hers or sometimes her fiancé's names and addresses swapped to avoid attention. But every path led back to my bank account. I realized I was not just an invisible guest. I was a ghost being used as collateral. They had used my name to secure the wedding. They had hidden my presence to preserve their narrative. And they had done it with the confidence of people who thought I would never notice. At first I felt shame that somehow I had failed to protect myself, that I had been too trusting, too eager to be wanted. But that shame turned into something sharper. Not revenge, not yet, but awareness. Awareness that my kindness had become currency, that my silence had been weaponized, that somewhere along the line I had stopped being her mother and started being her ATM. Though I made copies of the contracts, of the forms, of the emails, I printed and dated everything. Not because I planned to confront her, but because I needed a record. Not for the court, not even for the IRS, for me to remind myself that I had not imagined it, that I had, in fact, disappeared from my daughter's life while funding the very event that celebrated her future. She had asked me to stay silent. So I would, but on my terms, and only for now. The wedding was set at a private estate in the Hudson Valley. Stone fountains, candle-lit walkways, a string quartet beneath the arch of an old oak tree. It was the kind of place where silence felt curated, like even the birds knew not to ruin the ambiance. Servers floated through the cocktail hour with trays of chilled oysters and blush-colored champagne. A harp played softly under a white canopy lined with fairy lights. The guests arrived in designer dresses and tailored tuxedos. Everyone looked like they belonged in a bridal magazine spread. Everyone except me. I was placed at a corner table again near the back exit. Again, no core, no introduction. No one announced mother of the bride when I walked in. In fact, no one seemed to notice I had arrived at all. I watched my daughter glide through the room. She was radiant. I will not pretend otherwise. Her gown was sleek and satin with delicate beading along the sleeves. The veil floated behind her like mist. She smiled for photos, whispered to her husband, accepted compliments like they were her birthright. Her laughter was a polished sound, rehearsed, perfected. At the reception, just after dinner was cleared, lobster risotto and filet mignon. No vegetarian options this time. She stepped up to the microphone. She stood beneath a canopy of white roses with a glass of champagne in her hand and a stage behind her. All eyes turned. Her voice, sweet and certain, echoed under the open-air tent. "This wedding," she began, "was built from love and vision, and I want to thank those who made it possible, especially those who knew to stay in the shadows." There was polite laughter, a few knowing chuckles. She smiled, proud of herself. Proud of the illusion she had spent months curating. And that was when I stood. I had not planned to, not entirely, but something in her tone, the arrogance wrapped in that smile, split something inside me. Not anger, not spite, clarity. I walked forward, slow and deliberate, heels clicking on stone. People turned, conversations stopped. The photographer lowered his camera. I stepped up to the edge of the dance floor. I did not ask for the mic. I did not need one. My voice quiet but precise, carried through the still air. "This wedding," I said, "has been funded under false pretense." Heads turned. Whispers spread like spilled wine across linen. I continued steady. "The license remains unsigned." A few guests gasped. A waiter froze mid-step. "And this event," I said, raising the papers in my hand, "is now under IRS review." There was a silence I had never heard before, not even at my husband's funeral. Not even when my daughter slammed a door in my face 4 Christmases ago and told me she needed space. On stage, my daughter pawed. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. I stepped forward, holding out the documents. "This is a copy of the unsigned marriage license. This is the wire transfer from my bank account for $72,000 labeled under medical savings withdrawal." I held up another sheet. "Here's the wedding planner's email thanking the father's estate for funds that never existed." I pulled the last envelope from my folder. "And here's the receipt of my formal filing to the IRS documenting fraudulent use of personal funds, tax misrepresentation, and misattributed contractual identity." The groom looked at her. His face, moments ago smug with celebration, shifted into something horrified. "You told me it was legal," he whispered. She shook her head, eyes wide. "I didn't think you said your mom was senile," he said louder. "I just lost the case. And your mom was senile," he said louder. And now everyone heard it. My daughter reached out toward him, but he stepped back. Someone turned off the music. The string lights flickered, uncertain whether to keep pretending. A voice in the crowd asked, "Is this real?" Another answered, "She has the license. It's not signed." The best man tried to usher the groom away. The maid of honor pulled at my daughter's arm. She resisted. Her dress caught on a chair and tore at the hem. A small sound escaped her. But it was not a cry. It was fear, raw new. She had not expected this. She had not expected me. I folded the papers calmly. I did not yell. I did not point fingers. I simply looked at her. My child, the one I had fed from my hands and rocked through every fever. And I said, "You asked me to stay in the shadows, and I did. But you forgot. Shadows remember everything." I turned and walked away, leaving her in a silence she could not control. I returned to my seat. Someone had taken my water. No one dared offer me another. I did not mind. For the first time in years, I was not invisible. I was undeniable. Behind me, chaos unraveled. A mother of the groom began to argue with the wedding planner. A cousin took out her phone and began recording. Someone was on the phone, likely with a lawyer, but I had said what needed saying. I did not need applause. I did not need validation. I had given her everything she asked for, and tonight I gave her the one thing she never expected: truth. Not loud, but unshakable. By the time I made my tea the next morning, the world already knew. I was standing barefoot in my kitchen, the kettle whistling, when my neighbor knocked on the door. She is not the type to visit without calling, not the type to gossip either, but she stood there holding her phone like it was on fire. "You're trending," she said, eyes wide. I blinked. "Trending where?" everywhere. I took the phone. It was a video, 60 seconds. Shaky footage from someone's phone at the wedding. My voice, crisp, calm, cut through the ambient music. This wedding has been funded under false pretense. The license remains unsigned, and this event is now under IRS review. It had already racked up over 1.2 million views. The comments flooded in faster than I could read them. She didn't raise her voice once. Iconic. This is how you drop a bomb with pearls and posture. IRS Queen. Hashtag sprouted like wildflowers. IRS Bride. Wedding expose. Mom mic drop. People on TikTok recreated my moment, acting it out like a courtroom scene. Reddit threads dissected my body language like I was a judge handing down a sentence. One woman wrote, "I paused it at the 17-second mark, and the groom looks like he just saw his retirement disappear." Another simply said, "This is what happens when you underestimate a quiet mother." By noon, the clip had been picked up by a wedding drama subreddit, a financial justice blog, and 3 different gossip accounts on X. Then the journalists came. Headlines bloomed. Bride defrauds her own mother. Mom responds with law, not tears. Wedding of the year ends with IRS investigation. She funded the fantasy. Then she took the mic. It did not stop. A tax attorney on YouTube uploaded a 10-minute breakdown titled "Why IRS Bride's Daughter Could Be Facing Real Prison Time." In it, he explained the paper trail I had laid bare. How using someone's financial identity for contracts without disclosure constituted fraud. He cited the $72,000 wire, the license's absence of a signature, the venue's public exposure as a tax risk. This woman did everything right, he said. She signed nothing she did not mean. She gave without asking for credit. And when she was erased, she left a paper trail instead of a tantrum. That is legal brilliance in heels. Meanwhile, the designer who created her wedding gown released a quiet statement on Instagram. "We do not condone deception, financial exploitation, or the erasure of women who raised us. Our team has terminated its relationship with the bride effective immediately." They unfollowed her within the hour. Her once carefully curated wedding Instagram account went from 84,000 followers to 22,000 overnight. Every post flooded with comments. "Where's your mom now? Tell us again how you built it all on your own." Funny how fast independent woman turns into fraud when the lighting hits different. I did not respond to any of it. Not the reporters asking for interviews, not the influencers asking to collab on a grief and resilience series, not the podcast host who said, "You could be the voice of women over 60. Not even the TED Talk email invitation titled "Silence as Power," a conversation with the IRS bride. I wanted none of it. I had said my piece. That was enough. But I read the comments quietly. Slowly. Each one a bomb. A brick laid in the place where grief had once lived alone. And then I saw one that stopped me cold. It was a comment on the original video buried among thousands. I took my mom out of my wedding photos because I was ashamed of her dress. I told myself she'd understand. She never said a word, just sat through the whole thing in silence. After this, I printed her photo again. It's on my nightstand now. Thank you, IRS bride. I read that one twice. Then again. I printed it out and tucked it inside the journal I had not written in for years. The same journal where I had once recorded her first steps, her first words, her first lie. Not because I needed proof, but because sometimes the right silence leaves echoes in people you will never meet. Strangers began to send messages to my email. Dozens, then hundreds. Some long, some only a sentence. My daughter blocked me last Christmas. I still bought her baby gifts. My mom was erased from our family history because she had an accent. She still taught me how to pray. I've never seen someone like me win before. I was not winning, but I was no longer losing quietly. My daughter, meanwhile, went quiet. No posts, no stories. Her husband's account was deactivated. The wedding page was removed. Her planner stopped taking new clients. The venue issued a legal statement that all future clients would need financial verification from all co-signers. The industry that had erased me suddenly remembered I existed, and yet I felt no pride in her downfall, only peace in my presence. People kept asking what I planned to do next. Sue, write a book, speak publicly. I made tea. I watered my plants. I swept the floor, and I waited for the noise to pass because noise fades. But truth lingers, and this one had found 1,000 homes. The text came 3 days later. No greeting, no punctuation, just a string of words that arrived like a bruise. "Hope you're happy. You killed my wedding." That was all she wrote. No explanation, no apology, no acknowledgement of the lies, the manipulation, or the silence she had wrapped around me like a gag. Just blame, clean, sharp, and cowardly. I stared at the message on my phone for a long time. My thumb hovered over the keyboard once, maybe twice, but I typed nothing. What could I say to a daughter who had erased me in front of hundreds, then accused me of destroying the illusion she had built on my back? Instead, I took a screenshot. I printed it in black and white. I slid it into a laminating pouch and sealed the edges tight, like you would preserve a document you might need one day for court. Then I walked to my bookshelf, pulled out a photo album I had not touched in years, and flipped to a page from when she was sick. There it was, her tiny arms wrapped around my neck, legs dangling behind me as I carried her piggyback through Central Park. Her smile was wide, her eyes still full of the kind of joy that had not yet learned how to weaponize itself. I slid the laminated text next to that photo. She had once clung to me like I was her entire world, and now she sent me a sentence as cold as a closed door. That album stayed open on my coffee table for the rest of the week. Not as a shrine, not as a wound, but as proof that I had once loved her openly, fully, loudly, even when I knew she was learning how to forget me. In the days that followed, the offers came in waves. People I had never met wanted me to sit on their couches, wear microphones, tell my story to flashing lights, daytime talk shows, morning news segments, podcast producers promising millions of downloads, a TED Talk proposal with a glossy PDF deck titled The Power of Quiet Justice. I read every email, every pitch, every outline, and I declined every single one. Not because I was ashamed, not because I was afraid, but because I did not want to turn survival into performance. They wanted sound bites. I had lived an entire symphony. When one producer pushed back, offering a car service, a makeup team, even a segment where I could read the text out loud for impact, I replied with just one line. I do not need applause. I need peace. That was the truth. I had spent too many years being useful, quiet, convenient. I had spent too many birthdays alone. Too many holidays watching her post photos of the new chosen family she had built, as if biology were just a technicality. I had smiled through all of it, because that is what mothers do. We smile through omission of credit, of thanks, of presence. But not anymore. I did not smile when I received her text. I did not cry either. I just placed it next to a photo she had long forgotten, and I sat with the version of myself who had once carried her through heat and rain and grief. That woman deserved to be remembered, even if her daughter had decided otherwise. That week, I bought myself a small frame. Inside it, I placed a quote I found in an old book, one that had once comforted me during my widowhood. You are not required to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. I placed it on the hallway table beside my keys. A reminder, a marker, a quiet vow. Friends stopped by. Some brought flowers, others brought casseroles, but none of them asked what I would do next. They knew because they had known women like me. Had been women like me, mothers written out of stories they built, grandmothers left off the invitation list, sisters who paid for gowns they were not invited to see. They did not want spectacle, they just wanted to sit near someone who had survived. And so we sat in silence, in solidarity, in the kind of understanding that does not need to be posted or shared, the kind of understanding that lives in glances and nods and quiet cups of tea. She never wrote again, not to apologize, not to explain, not to ask for a second chance. And I never reached out. Not because I stopped loving her, but because I finally started loving myself enough not to beg. She said I killed her wedding, but she had already buried the relationship. All I did was stop pretending it was still breathing, and for once that was enough. It was quiet when I returned to the church, not the place where the rehearsal dinner had been, not the venue with chandeliers and rented vows, but the small white steepled church with creaky pews and sun-stained hymnals, the one my daughter had once said she wanted her wedding in, back when she still believed in simple things, back when she said, I want to walk down the same aisle you did, Mom. That church. It sat at the edge of our old neighborhood, nestled between an overgrown cemetery and a playground no one maintained anymore. Time had peeled its paint. Vines had started to curl around the windows, but it stood stubborn like a memory that refused to be erased. I parked across the street and sat in the car for a few minutes, watching as a breeze lifted the corner of the church bulletin posted to the door. Inside, the lights were off. It was Tuesday. No service, just silence. I walked up the steps slowly, one hand on the rail. The sanctuary smelled like old wood and dust. I knew that smell. It was the same one that clung to the hems of my wedding dress after I walked this aisle in 1973, clutching my father's elbow with trembling fingers. It was the smell of beginnings, of vows that still had time to mean something. I walked to the second pew on the left. It was the one she had pointed to during the planning visit. "This is where you'll sit," she'd said, and I had smiled. I remember the way she had leaned against me then, just for a second, like the little girl she used to be. That moment had been real. At least I want to believe it was. I reached into my bag and pulled out the envelope I had written 3 nights earlier. It was cream cold, thick, sealed by hand. I had taken my time with the letter inside, chosen every word like a stone placed carefully along a path. I placed it gently on the worn wood of the pew. Then I sat beside it for a moment. Not long, just long enough to feel something settle. In the silence of the church, my own breath was the only sound. Then a voice, soft, startled. Are you here for someone?" I turned. It was a girl, barely 20, I'd guess, holding a rag in one hand and a half-wiped candlestick in the other. Her name tag read Anna. She wore sneakers that squeaked on the tile. I nodded toward the letter. "I came to leave that." She looked down at the envelope, then up at me. "Do you want someone to find it?" "Yes," I said, but not too quickly. She sat on the edge of the pew behind me, hands resting in her lap. There was a kindness in her face, a weight she was too young to carry, but did anyway. She leaned forward, eyes on the letter again. "Can I ask what it says?" I hesitated. Then I recited it quietly without ceremony. "Dear daughter, this was never about me. It was about you learning that love is not a tool. Trust is not a transaction. You lost a wedding. I lost a daughter. I hope someday one of us returns. Mom." When I finished, Anna's chin trembled. She blinked fast. Pressing the edge of her sleeve to her eye, she asked, "If she does come back, will you forgive her?" I looked at her, really looked. The way her fingers fidgeted with the hem of her shirt. The way her voice had caught on the word forgive. Maybe she had her own letter, her own pew, her own version of a mother who loved too quietly. I answered the way truth demanded. "I didn't write the letter to be forgiven," I said. "I wrote it so I wouldn't turn to stone." She nodded slowly. "I think she'll come back," she whispered. I didn't agree. I didn't disagree. Hope is a tricky thing. Sometimes it keeps you warm. Sometimes it burns your hands. I stood. "Thank you for letting me sit here." She reached out and gently touched the envelope as if it were holy. "Thank you for leaving it." I walked out without turning back. Outside, the wind had picked up. The leaves skittered across the sidewalk like they were running from something or maybe toward it. I do not know if my daughter will ever read that letter. I do not know if she will return to that church, or to me, or to the version of herself that once believed a wedding was not a performance. But I left something there. Not for her, for me. A goodbye, a maybe. A map back to something real should either of us ever want it. And in that quiet old church, I felt something I had not felt in months. Not forgiveness, but release. I returned home quietly. No fanfare, no applause. Just the soft creak of my apartment door in Queens, and the familiar sigh of wood floors that knew my steps. The window above the kitchen sink had stuck again. The radiator still hissed like it had something to say, and in the corner of the living room, on the windowsill, where the sun lasted longest, sat my mother's cactus. It had been there for 60 years, planted in a cracked terracotta pot, its green arms reaching upward like they still expected to be held. My mother gave it to me the day I left home, wrapped in newspaper with a note that said, "Some things survive by growing slowly. Be patient with yourself." I used to hate that plant. When my husband died, I tried to throw it away. Could not. When my daughter moved out and stopped calling, I forgot to water it for weeks. It never died. Just waited. I sat beside it that evening, the sunlight stretching across the floor like a reminder that the world, even in its silence, keeps moving forward. That night, I opened the mailbox for the first time in days. Among the usual coupons and utility bills was a letter, handwritten, no return address. Inside was a short note on lined paper, the kind pulled from a notebook, folded carefully in thirds. My mother left behind a stone bench in a park. Her name is carved into it. For years I thought it was pointless, just something cold I passed by. But after your story, I went and sat on it. And now I go every Sunday. I talk to her. Thank you for reminding me that presence is a kind of legacy. There was no name, just a final line. You made space for women like her, like mine, like you. I sat with the letter for a long time. I did not cry, not anymore. I had cried enough for the woman I used to be. But I felt something else, a kind of rootedness, a sense that even if I had been cut from my daughter's photographs, I had not been erased from the world. Later that week, I went to the bank. I wore my best coat, the navy one with the inside pocket where I used to keep snack bars when my daughter was little and always hungry after school. I told the teller I wanted to make a withdrawal. She asked, "How much?" I said, $72,000. She looked at me the way people always do when they think older women are making a mistake. "Are you sure?" "Yes," I said. "It is mine, and I know what it is for." She nodded. She did not ask more questions. I took the check, walked out into the brisk afternoon air, and caught the train to a community foundation I had researched for weeks. They helped me set it up. A scholarship, a grant, a tiny fund with a long name, the Quiet Fund for Mothers Erased from the Frame. Its purpose was simple: to provide financial aid to women over 55 who had given and been forgotten, women who had funded weddings they were not invited to, grandmothers who bought books for grandchildren they were not allowed to see, stepmothers erased from obituaries, sisters who gave loans and were never called again. I made sure the application was written in plain English. No jargon, no humiliation, just one question. What did you give? And what would it mean to be remembered? I did not want their stories broadcasted. I just wanted them heard. The first application came in 2 weeks later. A woman from Missouri, she had paid her son's rent for 8 years. He married without telling her. Blocked her number, she wrote. I only want enough to fix my car so I can drive to the library again. We sent her the check. More letters came. Some short, some heartbreaking. I co-signed a loan. He defaulted. I lost my house. I gave up school to raise my brother's kids. No one came to my birthday last year, not even a card. I bought the dress, the flowers, the photographer. They cropped me out of every photo. These women did not want revenge. They wanted relief. They wanted a bench, a flower, a cactus that refused to die. They wanted someone somewhere to say, I see you, I know what you did, I know what they took, and I could do that. Not loudly, but fully. The fund grew slowly. A few donations came in after someone posted about it online. A retired teacher, a woman in her 30s who wrote, My mother never said a word, but now I understand what silence costs. I do not know if my daughter ever saw the website or the name of the fund. I do not know if she would recognize it as my final gift or my final boundary. But I did not name it after her because this was never about her. Not really. This was about me, the girl who raised herself beside a cactus, the mother who stood on a wedding stage and chose truth, the woman who, after losing a daughter, built something that could not be cropped out or forgotten. Roots are funny things. They do not scream, they do not bloom, but they hold on. They keep the tree upright long after the leaves have fallen, and if you dig deep enough, they are always there, even when the world above no longer remembers what they gave. If you have ever been asked to step out of the picture, if you have ever been treated like a guest at the table you paid for, then remember this. Not everyone who stays silent is weak. Some of us choose silence because we know truth echoes louder when it is not shouted. Grandma Truth Stories, where truth does not need to scream to be heard.